It sticks in these couple teeth.
I know these mine is because my gums are receding right there a little bit. As I get older.
Testing 1 2, testing 1 2.
Okay, let's call back to the order of the regular city council meeting of July 23rd with a roll call, please.
Mayor Martini?
Here.
Council members Abbott? Here. Lawson? Here. Smith?
Here.
Bybee? Here. Deere?
Here.
City Manager Driscoll?
Here.
Assistant City Attorney Eiding? Here. We have a quorum, thank you.
Okay, so we'll start by going over, Armando, are you doing this? 11-6, you're gonna do 11-6 and 11-7 together, is that correct, Armando?
Mayor Martini, Armando Ornelas, Assistant Community Services Director. If it pleases the mayor and the city council, what we'd like to do is one presentation.
Okay.
I will do it in conjunction with Karen Melby and Amber Sosa. And then I think then you would go to public hearing and then to possible.
Public hearing after those, okay. Take it away there, Mr. Ornelas.
Okay, as I said, Armando Ornelas, Assistant Community Services Director. This agenda item is a development agreement for a 7.72 acre parcel located on Los Altos Parkway, and it is being brought forward for city council action in conjunction with the next item on the agenda, which is a request to rezone the property from planned development, the Vistas, to MF2/PUD, which stands for residential multifamily, 12 to 14 units per acre. I will provide you an overview of these requests and present the development agreement, and then Development Services Manager Karen Melby, with support from Transportation Manager Amber Sosa, will present the rezoning request. And then, of course, all of us are available for any questions the council may have, and also in attendance are the applicant and his representatives. In terms of background for these requests, this site is located at 2255 Los Altos Parkway. If I could have the exhibit, please. So here's the site. It's located off South Los Altos Parkway. It is in the bluish color.
What color is it? Not cyan, is it cyan, not cyan?
Cyan, cyan.
All righty then. Everybody know what cyan looks like?
It's in the blue spectrum.
Okay, good.
Okay. And so it does have some topography, and it is here at this traffic circle. So as I noted, it is part of the Vistas Plan development, and the Vistas Master Plan and Community Design Standards were approved in 1988 by special use permit, which is how plan developments were initially approved by the city of Sparks. And that's the case in this instance because the Vistas Handbook is the oldest plan development in Sparks. As Ms. Melby will explain in greater detail, the subject site has been designated in the handbook for multifamily development at a density of about 12 units per acre since the handbook was approved in 1988. And the handbook stipulates that as areas become ready for development, they be rezoned appropriately for the development called for in the handbook. While townhomes are often considered a type of single-family housing product, the attached townhomes that are clustered in groups of 3 or more proposed for this site are only permitted in the city's multifamily zoning districts. So hence the request for the MF2 multifamily zoning district. The site has a comprehensive plan land use designation of MF14, which stands for multifamily residential, and that permits a density of between 10 and 14 units per acre. So the request to change the zoning to MF2/PUD is in conformance with the city's comprehensive plan. There was a previous rezoning request for this site last year, and the Planning Commission heard the case in August and recommended denial. Following the Planning Commission meeting, but prior to City Council consideration, the applicant withdrew that initial rezoning request. The applicant is now requesting the same change in zoning, but in conjunction with the development agreement. Typically, rezoning requests are not project-specific and conditions cannot be attached to a rezoning approval. However, the development agreement is a vehicle that allows for the city and the parties to prescribe how a site is to be developed, providing the Planning Commission, the City Council, and the public with project-specific information that can be considered at the time of rezoning. So, in other words, without the development agreement, you would be looking at the site. It would permit up to 108 units per acre. I'm sorry, 108 units in total, 7.72 times the 14. and you wouldn't have any basis for attaching any conditions to it. With the development agreement, we can stipulate, the parties can stipulate as to some conditions. And in this case, primarily the condition is that there's a maximum unit count of 75 units for the project. So this is the conceptual design or conceptual land plan for the site. Again, primary access would be off Los Altos here, and what it shows is a series of small clusters of townhomes, and the unit count would be capped at a maximum of 75. If at some future date the applicant proposes to increase the unit count or to make some other substantive change to the project described in this development agreement, the agreement would have to be amended, which would require a public hearing in front of the City Council. So I want to underscore that point. Any substantive change in terms of the unit count upward or to this conceptual plan would have to come back for reconsideration in terms of an amendment to the development agreement. Other notable provisions of the development agreement are in Section 2, which provides the developer a degree of regulatory predictability for the duration of the build-out of the project by defining the rules and fees that apply to development of the project. Section 3.1, which is where the project description is, also includes a requirement that at least 1.54 acres of the site be reserved as open space. So that's the 20% requirement that we have for planned developments in terms of open space. And then Section 6.1 specifies the duration of the agreement, which is 15 years. The agreement grants the developer the right to request one 5-year extension subject to certain conditions and approval by the City Council. So this went to the Planning Commission for consideration on June 7th, and they conducted a public hearing on both the development agreement and the rezoning request. The Planning Commission received extensive public comment opposing these requests at the public hearing. The Planning Commission determined, however, that they could make the applicable findings and voted to forward recommendations of approval to the City Council for both requests. Regarding the development agreement, which the Planning Commission reviewed for consistency with a comprehensive plan, they concluded first, that the proposed use and zoning designation of MF2/PUD would be in conformance with the existing comprehensive plan land use designation of MF14. And they viewed the development agreement as consistent with the comprehensive plan. As Ms. Melby and Ms. Sosa will elaborate, the infrastructure serving the site, including roads, water, and sanitary sewer facilities, was designed to support this type of development, complying with policy CF1 of the comprehensive plan. Rezoning of the site to permit additional housing units would support policy H1, which calls for ensuring that there are sufficient appropriately zoned areas with the infrastructure, public facilities, and services for the production of new housing. And then finally, the development agreement requires that the site and buildings be constructed in conformance with the multifamily design standards for multifamily for the MF2 zoning district and the design standards in the Vistas Handbook, which complies with policy CC9 of the comprehensive plan. So in summation, on the basis of this analysis, the Planning Commission recommended to you, the City Council, that you find the proposed development agreement with Landstar Companies consistent with the Sparks comprehensive plan and approve it by ordinance. So that concludes my initial presentation on the development agreement. If you have any questions, I will address them. Otherwise, if it's okay, Ms. Melby and Ms. Sosa will come up and do the presentation on the rezoning request.
Questions for Armando? Okay, good to go. Next. Melby, Ms. Sosa?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm Karen Melby, Development Service Manager. This portion of the presentation is covering Bill number 2743, which is an ordinance to rezone the real property, approximately 7.72 acres, which is located at 2255 Los Altos Boulevard. So you can see it's this property right here. The applicant is requesting to rezone this site from planned development, or PD, to multifamily 2, MF2/PUD, which is planned unit development, in accordance with the requirements of the Vista Handbook. The multifamily 2 zoning district allows for up to 14 dwelling units per acre. As the site is 7.72 acres in size, the multifamily 2 PUD zoning would permit up to 108. However, the applicant has requested to enter into a proposed development agreement restricting the density and characteristics of the project as discussed by Mr. Arnalis. The subject site has been designated multifamily development since the year 1988, when the Vista Handbook was approved. The Vista Handbook requires that areas to become ready for development must be rezoned appropriately for the proposed development. The handbook indicates that initially all of the Vista's planned development was zoned R115, which is single-family residential 15,000 square foot lots, which allowed a maximum density of 2.9 units per acre. As the areas were brought forward for entitlement and development at a variety of densities, the Vista Handbook required that they be rezoned to the R115 PUD to become developable regardless of the density implied by that designation. The R115, or single-family 15,000 square foot lots, and the R115 PUD zoning transitioned to SF15, which is single-family residential 15,000 square foot lots, and this SF15, or single-family 15,000 square foot lots / plan unit development. When we updated our zoning code in 2015, the SF15 zoning district only allows 3 dwelling units per acre, but the plan unit development suffix means that the standards from the Vista Handbook apply and allow for the higher densities. This area was designated multifamily development in the Vista's Handbook at a density of 12 units per acre. The multifamily zoning district in the Sparks zoning code that will accommodate that density, it would be multifamily 2, or MF2. The request to change the zoning to the MF2/PUD would be consistent with our past practices for the Vistas. The site has a comprehensive plan land use designation of multifamily. You can see the MF14 for the parcel, which allows densities between 10 and 14 dwelling units per acre. The request to change the zoning to MF2 PUD is thus conformance. So the existing is the PUD, and what they're proposing is changing it to the MF2 PUD. The development plan in the Vistas Handbook designates more multifamily development near or adjacent to the site. Contrary to this designation, those other multifamily sites were developed as single-family homes. Staff was unable to find any language in the Vistas Handbook that allows for the reduction in the density. Research into case history for the other sites that were designated multifamily in the original Vista Handbook, but developed as single-family, has provided no rationale to explain why the multifamily designation was not followed. Now to address the 3 findings. The first finding is Z1, which is consistent with the City of Sparks comprehensive plan. As Armando stated, the requested zoning for MF2 is a permitted zoning in our land use designation of multifamily 14. The zone change request fulfills goals H1, policy H1, and policy H2, which all relate to the availability of land for a variety of housing options in the areas that can provide the necessary services. The rezoning will allow the site to provide the housing, which is a regional need. Policy CF1 requires that the city services will be able to be provided at an adequate level in order to approve the zone request. Attached to the staff report is a memo from the city engineer, along with supporting documentations that states that the city services, which includes sewer, water, and transportation, can be provided at sufficient levels. The transportation will be addressed in more detail by Ms. Amber Sosa following my presentation. Finding Z2 requires that the project be consistent with the surrounding land uses. The subject site is located in a mature plan development, which is zoned plan development for both the Vistas and the Desert Highlands plan developments. The site is bordered by, let me go back to the vicinity map. The site is bordered by the Los Altos to the east, open space to the north and south, and single family to the west. The neighbors have expressed concerns that multifamily is not appropriate next to single family. And this would be our only situation where you have multifamily next to single family in the city. All over the city, there are places where single family and multifamily residential are adjacent to each other. Staff has evaluated our land use map and identified numerous cases. And just to list a few examples, in the existing developed housing areas, the first one is in the neighborhood of the Vista Boulevard and Bering Boulevard area. Another example is in the south of North McCarran and the Rock Boulevard area. In looking at our existing planned developments, an example is in the foothills at Wingfield, and another example is also in our Pioneer Meadows planned development. There are existing situations throughout the city where single-family and multifamily are adjacent land uses. The development map for the Vista's approval shows that this adjacency was anticipated since the year 1988. Through the tentative map process and the potential impacts that would be addressed through that process, the issues would be addressed. The adjacent open space will provide a buffer between land uses. Addressing the last finding, which is Z3, requires public notice. This was noticed in the Reno Gazette-Journal on May 24th, 2018, and notices were mailed to property owners within 750 feet of the subject property, which was a total of 269 letters or notices. The notices were not sent to all the property owners within the vistas because this is not an amendment to the Plan Development Handbook, but it is a zone change, and we followed the Nevada Revised Statutes requirements for noticing for a zone change. I would like to now turn over the presentation to Ms. Amber Sosa, for the city's transportation manager, to address the traffic issues.
Thank you, Mayor Martini, members of council. I'm Amber Sosa, transportation manager. The applicant has submitted a traffic analysis titled Traffic Analysis Summary for the Los Altos Townhomes. This was provided to the city on Friday, July 20th, and was posted to the public website. The traffic analysis supports that the project's impacts to Los Altos Parkway and the associated roundabout will continue to perform at the regionally accepted standards. Just to clarify, for a roadway such as Los Altos Parkway, serving less than 27,000 average daily trips, acceptable level of service is D. Regional standards are listed in the 2040 Regional Transportation Plan, also called the RTP. The RTP is updated every 4 years, and the last time it was adopted was May 18th, 2017. The analysis used the count of 108 units to develop the number of daily vehicle trips. The 108 is the highest density and the most units possible per the requested zoning. As you've heard before, it's noted that in the development agreement, the limit for the maximum would be 75. So in short, what I'm saying is that these numbers are conservative with padding. The PM peak would show 56 trips, and the AM peak would show 48 trips, and this still results in an acceptable level of service D. The traffic analysis further used a full build-out of the local community to evaluate overall traffic. This included existing traffic counts that were taken in August of 2017, and all improved but unbuilt single-family lots in the community. This includes the Miramonte single-family homes, phases 5, 6, and 7, their Miramonte townhomes, phase 8, the Sierra View townhomes, and this project, which is titled the Los Altos Townhome Project. The existing traffic counts were at roughly 11,078 daily trips. The full build-out with all the unimproved and with this one should total 16,293 trips. This proposed project is 627 of those daily trips in the full build-out. To give that number some reference, the threshold for this type of road to be widened to 4-lane facilities would be 17,500. So at full build-out, this facility will still service a level of service D underneath that threshold. The conclusion of the analysis, the roundabouts and the roadway sections will still operate at regionally accepted levels of service at full build-out of the area. The traffic analysis also went on to examine the existing roundabout at Vista Heights, where the proposed project is asking to tie into. An appropriate residential size for a roundabout such as this would range between 90 to 150 feet on the inscribed circle. This roundabout is currently 97 feet. So it's appropriately sized and it can handle the type of traffic that's being suggested. The traffic report
Quiet, please.
It was noted in the report through automatic simulations as well as observed larger vehicles going through it that they can make it through. They do use the apron, and these are based on national standards. The traffic report recommends, in summary, that the project construct the fourth leg of the roundabout with proper intersection sightlines for both pedestrian and vehicles, and also that the applicant improves the sightline to the crosswalk across Vista Heights to a reasonable extent. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions of staff, either Armando, Ms. Melby, or Ms. Sosa? From us? Ms. Bybee, go ahead.
So Amber, on the, talking about the roundabout right now, did you look at safety analysis of that leg as it comes, the new leg from this property, so to be the fourth leg that comes in? Did you look at the impact on the crosswalk, not the crosswalk, but on pedestrian traffic specifically? We have a lot of people that walk up and down the Greenbelt, throughout the day, but especially for school children, because when I just drove up and down today in and out of my neighborhood, I noticed on the Vista Heights side, it's all a yield. There's not a stop sign there. So if they're coming, people are exiting this property. Did you look at safety concerns and mitigation for how we protect pedestrians and school kids in particular if people are coming right out of that development into the directly into the roundabout? How do we protect pedestrians, and is it something that your traffic study looked at?
Councilwoman Bybee, I analyzed the traffic analysis that was provided by the applicant, and what they noticed is that they would design that leg with sight lines for both pedestrians and vehicles, and then they would take a look at the other one as far as to what extent. That would not come in yet. I would expect that to come in with the site improvements. So I don't have a specific for you, but it is noted that they would need to be assessed.
So would there be a stop sign at the exit of that development coming into the roundabout, or simply a yield? I'm just real concerned, especially with kids crossing. I mean, it's going to be a kind of a battle of people needing to get out and then kids trying to get across. Would there be a stop sign there? Or is there not a requirement inside their driveway as they exit, or do they just have a yield?
I don't have that information yet. I don't have the site design. I would not anticipate a stop sign, as that's not typically how roundabouts work. The applicant does have their traffic consultant who actually wrote this here. If you'd like to develop that with him, to my knowledge, I do not have that information right now.
Yeah, it's just kind of a different, it's not like the other legs that are in the middle of a road. So Vista Heights is a street with a crosswalk that's coming into it. And then Los Altos, north and south, they're coming in from a road. This is coming out of a development, so literally out of a driveway where people are exiting. It's kind of a unique, where I'm not seeing that in any other roundabouts or anywhere else that I can think of. So, I mean, it's a little unique compared to the other legs as far as safety was my concern.
My opinion would be that's why they addressed it the way we did. As the site comes in, as they further develop the number of units, that would be something that would come in and we would consider and give feedback and comments on. I just don't believe we're quite to that point yet.
Okay.
And I'm happy to turn it over if you'd like somebody else's opinion.
Okay. No, I just want to address that is a concern, and it's a concern I have from residents, but personally, I have that concern too.
Mr. Garrett, did you have?
Yeah, I'd like to ask this gentleman a few questions.
Good evening, Lauren Chilson with Traffic Works.
Yeah, so just driving that area, going up there, looking at it, and truthfully, I've added a few trips to the route these last few weeks, trying to find out what's happening up there, and just watching that, it seems to me like a small roundabout compared to anything else. So if you drive it, I'm not a traffic engineer, I'm just a guy driving the road, and so can you speak to that a little bit? Can you?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, council member. At this point, we haven't opened it.
Oh.
Staff is still in the middle. I think we need to get back onto the process of
Yeah, but I usually
finishing
have,
up with staff.
okay, that's fine, but I usually have, when we have a meeting like this, I always have staff, and then I have the applicant if they want to do a presentation before I open up public comment.
I
Is
just
that
didn't know
not-
if
is
we
that
wanted
not
the
right?
applicant to.
Is that not correct? I've always
Well,
done it that way.
The applicant, I believe the applicant would like to speak before you get down to the applicant's
Okay,
expert.
that's fine, okay. Let's
I
hold that.
retract everything I just said.
Let's hold
Didn't
that. and
happen.
Okay, let's call up the applicant or the applicant's representative, whichever, and go from there. Is that all right, Cheryl?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Good evening.
You'll have your chance, I'm sure.
Good evening, Mayor Martini and members of the Sparks City Council. For the record, Angela Foose, Planning Director with Loomis and Associates, here today on behalf of Landstar. Joining with me is Lauren Chilson from Traffic Works, and between the two of us, we're going to give you a very short presentation and include some information about traffic. So I wanted to kind of start with legally how we came about this process. As staff has mentioned, when the Vistas PUD was approved back in 1988, it did include the site, and it did show that the site was zoned, planned for multifamily with a density of up to 12 units per acre. This parcel was created back in 1997, and so it was shown at that time as the 7.72 acres. So based on that size and the allowed density is how we got to 108 units being the maximum units. So nothing has changed. The handbook has not been amended. That is always what the intended density has been. We also have the CCNRs, and those CCNRs have not been amended. They do call out multifamily, which does allow for townhomes. Within the CCNRs, it does specifically talk about a minimum building square footage for townhomes of 1,000 square feet. It also talks about a requirement for either a garage or a carport for townhomes. And then oddly, it has some requirements for draperies within multifamily development. Here's a before and after, just so you can see initially what was planned for on the left as part of the PUD, and then actual build out of the development is on the right. And so I've highlighted our specific parcel in yellow so you can see again how it was always planned for. And so the area has developed. Multifamily has been allowed for whatever reason, as staff called out. The areas that are beyond this parcel that were shown for multifamily were not built to multifamily, and we don't really understand the process as to why that happened, because normally when you have an approved PUD, you have to follow that to the law. What we have today is, like I said, legally what's before us. So what's before us is this property. It does show that it's going to be multifamily, and that's what we're doing today. So one of the requirements is anytime you develop within the Vistas PUD, you have to actually come in and zone it. So the lowest density zoning that the City Sparks designation offers for multifamily is MF2. So again, there's 4 different zoning designations that we could have gone with, but because it's specifically called out for about 12 dwelling units per acre, we took the lowest density possible. The other thing we did was we added a development agreement, and the whole purpose of a development agreement is to be able to give the council the ability to, I would say, condition the project. There was a lot of concerns about, from the neighbors, that they didn't want to see this developed with apartments. They wanted to make sure that the density was appropriate. So we went back and we said, well, how can we put in those assurances? So we put in a conceptual site plan that gives people an idea of how it's going to look. We made sure that we had access. So we have a fire access, 2 ways in, 2 ways out. We also looked at open space and landscaping. So we wanted to make sure that the site could actually work from a concept level. So we added that as part of this agreement. And then we also added the density, and we put a cap on it. And again, you can do up to 108 units, but we've said that doesn't make sense, especially for this site. There's some topographic challenges, so let's limit it to 75 units. That's quite a difference from what was initially approved at 108. And here's that conceptual site plan. So what this does show you is that everything around this property has an open space designation. That open space is part of the homeowners association parcel. So that open space will never change. What we've also done is we've added some areas. Is this not showing? There we go. Areas here within our parcel that also will be set aside as open space. And so these homes here on the left will always be buffered. And then we have open space on the south and open space on the north, so that homes all around this property will always be buffered with open space. And again, as part of this concept, we wanted to let people know that this was not intended to be any kind of a low-income apartment project. We heard a lot of concerns about that. This is a townhome project, which is a for sale. So it's no different than any other single-family home. You buy it, you own it. There were some also concerns about the Vistas Homeowners Association, and how do we make sure that they are contributing their fair share? Because they are part of the Vistas HOA, they are required to pay the same dues, and so that is outlined in the HOA. Nothing changes. And then we also came up with some concept drawings of what the buildings would look like. Because we're in the Vistas plan development, we are required to have similar architectural style as the development surrounding the property. So here's some examples of what that architectural style would look like. To give you an idea of the size, the concept drawing shows the units of about 1,600 square feet. So this is typical with single-family homes. And in fact, the single-family homes surrounding this property, the one-story units are about 1,300 square feet. So many of these units will actually be bigger than the single-family homes surrounding the units. And then in terms of price, this is the market is what it is. And so we can tell you what the anticipated price is based on today's market. And we're looking at prices in the range of $350,000 to $400,000. Again, very comparable, if not higher in value than the surrounding neighborhood. And next, I'm going to pass it over to Lauren, and he's going to address some of the traffic concerns.
Lauren Chilson with Traffic Works. So we have completed a traffic analysis that, as Ms. Sosa adequately mentioned, is for full build out of the community, includes all known properties, including all of Miramonte that's still not yet completed, but that's all in our analysis so that we recognize every bit of traffic that will be there. It's important to note that this project is 75 units per the development agreement, would generate only 39 peak hour trips. Spark's typical standards for a traffic study only kick in at 80 peak hour trips, so we're not even at the threshold that normally would require a traffic study. We've done one anyway, but the number of trips is really quite low. Los Altos Parkway will function at acceptable levels of service at full build out, as Ms. Sosa well discussed. And then you should also be aware, certainly you are, but that there are improvements conditioned at the Los Altos South and Vista Boulevard intersection, which improve that left turn movement in the morning to go south on Vista, which is that area that's many people cite as, if there's a congestion issue, it's really here. And so there are other improvements planned to address that issue. Next slide. In a second. As I mentioned, the traffic study is based on full build out. Even at that build out, the roundabout will function very well, really level of service A, even during the peak hours. There has been some interest in the size of the roundabout, and I'll say that there's no hard and fast, super hard rules to this. Roundabouts can range in size. What's really important is how all the other legs and how the truck apron and the geometries are set so that vehicles can move through them efficiently. This roundabout is 97 feet in diameter. Typical for a single lane roundabout is 90 to 150, and that's a really broad range. My experience is that about 110, 100, 105 is more common, more typical, and I can cite a couple examples. The roundabout at Regency and Wells in downtown Reno is 105-foot diameter, and that's on really a regional road with very high traffic volumes, really twice what's going on here. This roundabout does accommodate truck traffic, and if we could have the overhead just for 1 second, I will expand on the graphic you see there. This exhibit is for a WB50 semi-truck. That's the next largest from an interstate style truck. So it's a large truck, and it's shown through a auto turn, an analysis program we use that tracks vehicles through intersections. It's shown making those movements. Now that truck would be there very, very rarely. I personally observed the next size truck down at WB40, which has a 40-foot wheelbase, move through that roundabout without using the truck apron. I also observed some full-size pickup trucks towing RV trailers, long ones. Those trailers barely used the truck apron. They did go up on it a couple feet, but it was just a minor amount. So all in summary, the roundabout is appropriately sized for national standards, and design vehicles move through it efficiently. The 90-degree geometry, each leg coming in at 90 degrees, easily enables the fourth leg. That's what we'd be looking for to add a fourth leg to a roundabout. Can it fit without having a skewed or kind of a strange angle in the roundabout? Since everything is 90 degree, we put the fourth leg in on a 90 degree. That works well with the site plan, and it's functional. I did hear a question about controls at the roundabout, it would be yield control. That would be the only appropriate control in a roundabout. To have 3 legs yield and another stop would present some really interesting and I think some confusing issues. So again, bear in mind that the trip making out of this project would be only 39 trips in the peak hour. It's really a very low volume. And that would be during the PM peak hour. During school hours, there would be fewer than that. So the conflicts would be even less. And as we've noted before, the sight lines must be appropriate. We'll make sure they're appropriate. We have to for everyone's safety. So that design will be proactive in addressing sight lines.
Okay, and I have one more slide if we could bring it back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so there have been some, again, concerns brought up by the neighborhood, and we wanted to, again, let you know that we have that development agreement in place. If there are additional conditions that you wanted to add, these are some of the things that were brought up during a community meeting that had not been added, but we wanted to bring it to your attention if you so choose to do so. Now, keep in mind, when you do townhomes, the next step in the process is a tentative map. So that does require a planning commission public hearing. So this isn't the first time that the neighbors will have a chance to comment. And at a zone change, we don't get into a lot of specifics on the project, but at a tentative map project, we actually look at how many parking spaces we have, specific setbacks, where the trees and the shrubs going to be located. So it's the very specific design. So that's when you can condition a project, and that's when you'd be looking at specific things. But we've outlined here a few items so that if you choose to, you can add that in as part of the development agreement, or again, these are things that will show up at the tentative map if you choose to move forward with this zone change approval. So one of the things was concerns over parking, and the applicant has agreed to put in 2-car garages within each of the units. There's also concerns about safety around that roundabout related to pedestrian crossing. There's crosswalks all around the roundabout. There's also a significantly, I'd say it's a pretty actively used crosswalk closer to Goodwin. So while that's not necessarily connected to this project, there's a lot of pedestrian activity on that crosswalk. So if you choose to, we would be definitely willing to put in a pedestrian activated flasher at that crosswalk, or really any of the crosswalks that you feel is appropriate. And again, that would be based on city engineering approval, based on that design. As Lauren mentioned, a traffic analysis is not required, but if you choose to require it, we can definitely do that, again, as part of the tentative map that looks specifically at the design of the roundabout at that time. As Lauren's traffic recommendations are suggesting, he's asking that we put in that 4th leg based on standards. And so those standards outlined here, if you want to make it a condition, we'd be open to that as well. And then looking at the sight line on the crosswalk where we're adding that 4th leg, if you wanted to put in a requirement that they add some of the existing vegetation, there's some of the landscaping there that's mature, that's been there a while, that could possibly get in the way of that sight line when cars are coming out. So we would look at that as part of the analysis again, and that's more at the time of tentative map. But if you wanted to add that in as a condition, that would be something you could do as part of the development agreement. That concludes our presentation, and we are available if you have any questions.
Okay, questions of the applicant? Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Anybody have a question to that? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You said these townhouses are going to be 1,600 square feet with a double-car garage.
Correct. So when we had to put together the conceptual site plan, we wanted to make something that was realistic and not a cartoon drawing. So we came up with some concepts of how big those units would be, and those were based on 1,600 square feet, give or take approximately. Some are slightly bigger, and then also assuming 2-car garages.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Charlene, go ahead.
So as talking about parking, the 2-car garage obviously does help as far as mitigating parking. Question on how many overflow or guest parking will there be? Because you are unlike in the rest of our neighborhoods in the Vistas, you're not on a public street where you can park publicly. The whole Vista or Los Altos Parkway is no parking all along Los Altos because it is a bike lane on both sides. So how many people can you handle? I have a lot of concerns regarding where will people park, the 2-car garage, but other parking, and where would people go to park? Because there really is none surrounding the property.
Exactly. And so we have provided, I would call it more pocket parking places around the site plan. The concept site plan here has about 20 parking spaces, but we made sure that we had extra room within that open space area where we could add additional parking. The city zoning code has minimum parking requirements, so that's the minimum that we have to meet. Again, requiring the 2-car garage definitely exceeds that, and then adding the additional guest parking outside of that garage will also exceed that requirement. And all of that will be shown as part of the tentative map. So that gives you, again, kind of that second step in the process to see specifically how many parking spaces and where they'd be located.
So are there driveways, or do you drive right into the garage, as a lot of condos and townhouses have? Is there parking only in the garage or in a driveway?
Yeah, based on this concept drawing, there's not specific driveways. There's garages fronting the front setback.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else, questions for the applicant? Okay, questions for staff, anybody? Any questions? We're gonna start the public hearing?
I had one question.
Go ahead, for staff or whatever, go ahead.
Actually, this is probably from Cheryl, from the legal side. I had a concern on if,
Who's this for?
this is for Cheryl, this is legal.
Okay.
To find out our legal, what the liability or who the responsible parties would be if at the time of construction and there's blasting that has to occur, because that is pretty much a rock hill up there. If there is blasting damage done to any of the surrounding residents, is that something the developer is responsible for, or does the city hold any liability?
I believe the first step is that any blasting permits would be required to go through the fire department, through the fire marshal. It's my understanding that good practices as far as the construction, and I'm sure Ms. Foos can probably answer these questions concerning the blasting, but there are best practices, and I believe it would be a private liability for the contractor. The contractor will be the one that's responsible for inspecting before, during, and after.
Okay, thank you.
And it'll be part of the permitting process as well. So this will all come back with the tentative map and then subsequent when they come in and apply for the permitting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
So we haven't gotten down into the weeds yet, have we? There's a long way to go before we get into the weeds of what's actually, the whole process is gonna take a long time. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, I do have one question, just safety-wise, and it's to you, Angela. If you mentioned the idea that you'd even particularly consider the need of putting in some safety hazard walkways for over there, which I think is a good idea, but how do we dictate that that is important? Who makes that decision? Is it just, do we have a study that happens? How does that particular function? What would be your approach to that?
The recommendation, and again, this is something we would have to work through with the city engineer to make sure that we're not creating more of a problem with the flashers. Here's a map that actually shows where I was talking about. This area here, this crosswalk here, gets a lot of activity. Part of the reason is because the sidewalk on this side ends, and then the sidewalk over here starts. So there's not a sidewalk necessarily over here. So Goodwin is right here. Oh, there we go. So this is the crosswalk that most likely, I would say, again, because it's not necessarily connected to the project. So that's more of, in addition to any flashers that you want to see in the roundabout, the crosswalk further down is the one that the applicant is saying he would put in pedestrian flashers there as well. But we would be working with the city engineer and our traffic engineer to see where it's most appropriate within the roundabout, whether it's to put flashers on all 4 sides of the roundabout, or if it's more specific to this area here or this area here, and that would be a discussion with the city engineer.
Thank you. Anyone else questions? Okay, here we go. We're gonna open the public hearing here in a second. Just for information, this is not a personal deal here for anyone. Nobody personally is, I hate to hear personal comments about somebody, staff or whatever. This is not personal for anybody. I understand there's some heavy emotions here. There's some compassion here. There's a lot of emotional things that go on here that we're going to be talking about, but this is not a time to be pointing fingers personally at anybody or personally reprimanding somebody or disparaging somebody. That's not what this is about. This is a public hearing. Please act accordingly and speak your piece, but make it civil, please. Nobody's here to disrespect anybody. This is a process that we're gonna go through, that we have to do, and that's the American way. This is why we do this, is to invite people to public hearings, and I would appreciate it if you didn't disparage anybody. So having said that, we'll open the public hearing, and I will start with the group I have now. Do we have a bunch of overflow in anywhere else? Is there everybody in the area?
There's a few people in the lobby, but not too many.
But everybody's in this area, nobody in another building or outside or anything. Okay, good. Bill Wagner, followed by Sharon Taylor. Come on ahead, Bill. So I'll just call a couple at a time. So if the second person I call, if you'd be ready to go, please, we'll make this a quick process, or as quick as possible. I've said you have 3 minutes.
Well, now you can notice I brought a few friends with me.
Okay, good. Thanks, Bill.
Mr. Mayor, City Council. For the record, my name is Bill Wagner, and I live in the Vistas. I'm here to talk about 225 North Los Altos Parkway, PNC 18-0019 multifamily homes. After approximately 16 times coming before this city council on this issue, I'm still asking you to please vote no on multifamily homes, but yes on single-family homes. I personally would like to thank the mayor and all the city council members, including the city manager, city attorney, city clerk, and the lady behind the screens there, for putting up with me. The many hours that I spent in this council chambers, I've learned a lot about how Spark operates. It's been very nice. I have the greatest respect for each of you council members, knowing at times on how difficult your job can be. I know that tonight is one of those difficult decision-making times for all of you. The decision-making process can be looked at in 2 ways. 1, you can apply the rule of law, or you can ignore it. 2, you can listen and understand and accept all the facts and concerns of the homeowners who choose to speak and those who choose not to speak. They are all saying no to this development. In conclusion, I would like to also thank John Erickson, the city engineer, that in the near future there is no plans to touch the islands for the purpose of street widening on North Los Altos Parkway. Thank you, folks, very much.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Okay, Sharon Taylor, followed by Bruce Homan.
First off, I would like to address all my friends back here. This is not the time to be angry. This is the time to think things out and do it right. I live on Goodwin. My biggest concern is the kids. I come up Los Altos a lot of times during the time when the children are either walking to or coming home from school. I see traffic that will not stop for them. They're standing there at a crosswalk and they can't get across. They just drive right past them, driving like a bat out of hell, excuse my language, but they go around that roundabout like it doesn't even exist. We have speed bumps on Goodwin. the big lumber trucks, a lot of big heavy equipment that is not on trailers are driving up Goodwin, going like crazy. And they don't care if there's a speed bump. They go right over it. And the kids are trying to ride their bikes or their scooters or walking. And I saw a little girl darn near get hit before school was out. And it's just heartbreaking because they are not respecting the children. So what I'm asking you guys to do is to really come down on something for those kids. I don't care, myself, I don't care if you put stop signs or whatever at the roundabout. I'm worried about somebody's child getting hit. That's really important. As far as this development, I still would rather it was homes. Single-family homes like the rest of the vistas, because this is going to cause big problems. It might not look like it right now, but it will. And I don't understand, they said there's going to be 2 exits. Where? Is it coming out on Los Veltos? And then are they tearing down houses on Goodwin to come out there somewhere? If they come out on Goodwin, there's an island there, so they have to come all the way down, flip a U-turn, and come all the way back to Los Altos. So I just want you all to think about this really hard, because it's really important. And I've been here 21 years on Goodwin. And I moved here for the quiet and the peacefulness. And boy, you ought to hear those construction trucks barreling down Goodwin to the Sky Ridge development. They don't stop for those speed bumps. They're driving down there way over 15, they should be going 15 miles an hour because of the kids walking to school and stuff, but they don't. They're going at least 30. Thank you for hearing me, and please think about it.
Thank you. Bruce Holman, followed by Mary Newhoff.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity to let me voice some concerns here about this issue. As we all know, Los Altos Parkway is a single lane each direction. That's all we have. And so traffic is one of our basic concerns and the safety of. And the additional amount of traffic that would come from this development, especially at the peak traffic times, I think the increase in volume of traffic would increase substantially. This also would increase the possibility and even likelihood of being involved in an accident. The zoning change would also slow down the response time of our emergency services, like the fire department, the police department, the emergency medical units, being able to get in and out. So not only the higher concentration of population would increase the traffic, but it also increase the usage of our, local natural resources. I know I've seen some of the write-ups you've done on the sewer, the drainage, and even the traffic studies, which I don't really agree with the traffic analysis, living here for the last 12 years up in the vistas, but that's what I guess we as citizens have to accept, or at least for now. But even the natural resources we have, like the water, for example, we just got done with the 8-year drought here, 2 years ago? And we were on water rationing here. And I just, water's a pretty precious resource for us here in the high desert. So I think that would be a consideration as well. And I'm kind of, I guess, a little skeptical on the size and the price of these things, because they sound, you know, pretty expensive. $350,000 to $400,000 is a lot of money for a townhouse, I think. But even so, not only with the higher traffic, I think the higher population would also, it just goes to follow, there would increase crime, and normally these kind of units do lower the property value of the rest of us. So just in closing, I'd just like to say, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. So please keep the Vista zone for single-family homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Excuse me, Mary Newhoff, followed by Gary R. Smith.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Probably not going to be able to add a lot new to what has been said at the previous meetings because probably mostly everything has been addressed, but I still believe there is no acceptable rationale for following the 88 plan to turn this one relatively little lot into a multifamily development when when there were 7 ingredients that were supposed to be in this whole community feel area. Only 6 of them never happened. Single-family homes went in. There's no other multifamily residences. There's no fire station. There's no park, and there's no community center. And now all of a sudden, it just becomes a cause célèbre to develop this little lot that's smack dab in the middle of single-family homes that don't want them. And I realize, you know, that's no legal reason for not doing it. Maybe there was a legal reason why the other one should have been done, but that still doesn't give credence to the fact that this one should be done now. I am concerned. 2 people at one of the previous meetings told me that they lived in the area where some blasting was done. They lived up Vista Heights around Stoneview. And when they were blasting the area where my house is now on Goodwin Court, their house had roof tiles broken by, you know, soaring, falling rocks. They had some window glass breakage. I don't know if either of those people are here now. They could speak up if they are. It was 2 ladies. I reviewed the 1988 plan as much as I could. There's somewhere in there it says something about not wanting the ground or the land to be more than a 15% gradient before it's excavated for anything. And this for sure is more than 15%. It has to be. I mean, I live right on the other side of it. There is something in the master plan about, you know, nets to catch rocks and other devices to keep the rocks from hitting the houses. I'm concerned about, I would like to ask the developer if there are any plans to surround the particular development with a wall that would make it not possible for people to walk out of that development into the open areas that are not part of the development. I'm concerned very much as Sharon was, and I'm sure everybody is, about the traffic and the kids. I'm retired. I drive around the area at all hours of the day, sometimes at night, but the kids aren't out then. And I see children with the same problems that have already been mentioned. And I just think this is a really, really poor place to put this development. And I wonder why this lot was picked when there have got to be other ones that would have been much less of a problem for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary R. Smith, followed by Ken Williams.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
Get my eyes right here. Getting to the point I can't read with either way. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Gary Smith, and my wife and I have lived at 2212 Stoneview Drive for the last 24 years. And we're here discussing a potential approval of a housing project on the last developable lot in the Vistas. I know many things were planned for the community, but only single-family houses have been built in the Vistas in the last 26 years. To now approve a multifamily development on the last parcel would be, I feel, a great disservice to all of the current residents and the city. The density of multifamily is just too much for this parcel. There is a path that can be taken to zone this parcel single family, and I would ask the council to find a way to make this last parcel the same as all others and be single family. Regardless of what would be built on this parcel, I'm also asking that parking be paid particular attention to. The development of the parcel must be conditioned that all parking, resident and visitor, be contained on site. There's no room on Los Altos for parking, and the only alternative will be the adjacent streets such as Stoneview. The problem is the residents on Stoneview are already parking on that street. I estimate that half the homes around me have their garages full of their possessions. My neighbor across the street from me has 3 vehicles, a travel trailer, and a 3-car garage completely full of their possessions. They're always on the street. It's unacceptable to approve a development that is inadequate parking on site for both residents and visitors. Finally, when this project is being built, single family, I hope, what are the traffic control plans for construction is connecting to Los Altos? Will Los Altos be closed? When the traffic circle was built, those of us on Stoneview could barely get out of our driveways due to the traffic from up the hill speeding around the corner onto Stoneview. I myself was almost hit several times trying to get to work. And I mean locked up brakes and skid marks and everything else. It's a blind corner. And this is dangerous. Please consider these things. Thank you.
Sir. Ken Williams, followed by Nick Williams.
Hello, everybody.
How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm okay. Thank you. My name is Ken Williams. And my wife and I live on the first cul-de-sac on Vista Heights Drive and have been there for 19 years. And we have accepted most of the changes in the area. Now, you know, in real estate, they say location, location. You've heard it. This location at 2255 Los Altos is unique, as it is at the top, the pinnacle, the middle of our community, and surrounded by single-family homes. This is an ideal location for the developer and a black eye for our community. With this rezoning request, the idea of moving a mountain and building a cluster of townhomes is completely inconsistent with the surroundings and just doesn't fit. Concrete issues, where am I at? Is the overcrowding of Bud Beasley Elementary, noise, property depreciation for existing homes, and a negative impact on the quality of life, just to start. The Vista Terrace community is above us. It's a vast community, and there's hundreds of homes up there with one way in, one way out. Then you have Miramonte, Ventana, all leading, and the Vistas leading to the Los Altos Parkway. The majority of this traffic leads to the Vista Heights roundabout, which has been an ongoing problem since it was built due to its small size and excessive traffic. If you look at that picture, it sure makes it look a lot bigger than it is. But there are tire marks around that entire thing. They built a 2-foot concrete wall because people were wiping out the landscape and the retaining wall. And I drove by there today and saw it chipped, and I'm thinking, who's driving on the sidewalk? Anyway, that's something else. The concept of this developer putting the outlet on this mini roundabout is nothing short of reckless planning. This is not our biggest issue. It's just collateral damage. There are 4 homes in our cul-de-sac. If you put them all together, it's over an acre. When anybody has a special event, a lot of kids, this and that, the cars line up down Vista Heights driving around the cul-de-sac, and that's okay. They're our neighbors. But I try to imagine 10 to 14 homes in this area, and frankly, it's a little scary. I don't know what to say about it. Not to forget, we only have over 6 acres to work with because 1.5 is common area. The true fact, many of the residents have been here for 20 years. They're good people. They've supported Sparks and helped make a fine community. The people that are backed up to this proposal or live across the street or on Stoneview, my heart goes out to all of you. Because I put myself in your shoes. I'm thinking, for me, it would be like rolling the dice, seeing where the chips fall or move. What a choice. No, I don't have all the facts and figures. I live there. I see what's going on, and it's congested. I'm asking you, please vote no on this proposal, please. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Nick Williams, followed by Micah Hamilton.
Hi, my name is Nick Williams, and I've actually emailed all of you prior to this meeting, and I'd like to thank all of you for getting back and taking the time to read my emails. I really appreciate it and know that you're listening. So this weekend, I was able to watch an interview with Mayor-elect Smith, where this issue was discussed, not at length in any sort of compromising manner, but a couple of statements just really didn't sit right with me as a resident of the Vistas. The first statement was that the categorization of the people in Vistas as being anti-growth, and I really don't think that's true. We've seen hundreds of new homes built in our area. My wife and I walk up to the site of the Sky Ridge development probably about twice a week to watch the sunset. And while it bums me out a little bit that some of the places we stand might soon be someone's living room, we aren't against the development. We've absorbed the massive Miramonte development to our north and the new growth in the D'Andrea area. As a community, I think we've seen as much growth as almost any in the region. But we're tired of bearing all of the costs associated with this development. As the city sees increased funds from new property taxes, we as citizens have seen nothing but added congestion. We haven't seen any new roads. We don't see increased police and fire services, and we definitely haven't seen any parks or pools as a result of this new influx of homes. As a community, we're tired of being painted as irrational elitists, when the truth is the city does nothing to support the development that it's been approving. City staff is making recommendations about the viability of our roads that took measurements almost 2.5 years ago. The August 2017 study actually references an additional study that used measurements from February of 2016. Imagine going to the doctor with a sore leg and then pulling up an x-ray from 2.5 years ago and telling you you're fine. As citizens, we're coming to you, our elected officials, and telling you that the major traffic arteries we rely on each day to get to and from work are clogged. And you're telling us that 2.5 years ago, we were fine, so don't worry about it. Actually, that analogy is maybe a little bit better than the current situation. Even in the 2-year-old traffic study, the traffic engineers recommended increasing the size of the turn lanes on South Los Altos, which hasn't been done. If the city doesn't have the desire or means to widen a turn lane at the recommendation of their own study, what confidence should we have in their ability to address the more complicated task of converting what city staff calls a traffic circle into one of the city's only 4-point roundabouts? On another note about that roundabout, it's at the bottom of a really steep hill that ices up every single winter. As my uncle pointed out earlier, it's been rebuilt several times and now has 2 feet thick retaining walls because so many vehicles have crashed into it. This is the only point of ingress and egress for these poor people who are going to live in that apartment complex. Mayor-elect Smith, I'd like to point out we are not anti-growth. We've really just lost confidence in our city's desire to support us. Another statement that was made is that we're talking about 1,600 square foot townhomes with 2-car garages. Those restrictions are nowhere in the current, absolutely. Those restrictions are nowhere in the current development agreement. If this is proposed or if this is accepted, the only thing the city is able to do is mandate that the developer comply with the MF2 zoning standards, which have none of those very nice, very positive things that have been discussed. So please, if you're going to support this issue, ask for a better deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Micah Hamilton, followed by John Bishop. Hey, Teresa.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. You've heard all the facts. You've heard all the lawyerese. Something I didn't hear in any of those factors was the human factor. I work with engineers in hospitals, and they forget the human factor. The human factor destroys roads. The human factor robs houses. The human factor burns open spaces. None of that has been calculated. My street's destroyed right now, and I'm wondering where the funding is going to come to pave it. Los Altos looks like Mack trucks drive up and down that thing every day, and it's just cars. The human factor has not been addressed. And as Ms. Bybee has brought up, the safety factor of the kids. Are we going to be paying for more teachers? Paying for more police officers? Paying for more firefighters? When is that going to come? When it's too late? When our kids are run over by cars from people who don't care? That's some of the concerns that I didn't hear addressed. And I hope you put those into your thought processes too in making your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. John Bishop, this last card I have to speak. Welcome, John.
Good evening. There are roughly 1,190 single residence dwellings within half a mile of the 7.7 acres being considered for rezoning to multiple residence structures. That means that if each of those homes decrease in value to lower the tax revenue to Sparks by $1, each of the 75 units have to generate $15.87 each to replace that just to break even. That's just kind of an arm's length view. I'm going to shift gears here. Over the past 10 years, and I went from 2007 to 2017 because the 2018 city independent audit isn't in yet, roughly 5% area increase, and its population growth varies depending on whose figures you use. For 10 years, between 2007 and 17, some sources cite less than 6%, others sort as much as 16% population growth. So let's for the moment use 11%, which is halfway between those two figures. For the last 10-year period, let's look strictly at public safety requirements, police, fire, and public works. And most of these figures are pulled from, as I said, the 2007-2017 City of Sparks Independent Audit. In 2007, the Sparks PD had 111 uniformed officers. To keep pace with an 11% population increase, we should currently have 123 officers. Currently, as well as 1 year ago, we had 112. That's an increase of 1. That leaves a shortfall of 11. And with the new crimes, cyber crimes, identity theft, scams in general, mixed in with the number of calls the normal police department gets, maybe 11 additional officers isn't enough to bring us up to a par with where we are in 2007. In 2007, the Sparks Fire Department had 114 firefighters. To keep pace with that 11% population increase, we should now have 127. Currently, as well as 1 year ago, we had 86. That's a shortfall of 41 trained firefighters for the existing population of Sparks. But the total shortage of 52 police officers and firefighters combined is only half the story. The total of all three departments, police, fire, and public works, was 352 at the end of 2007. At the end of 2017, that total had fallen to 250. That accounts for another 50 civilians, administrators, staff, and workers. No longer have one to protect and defend the people who live here. I have hopes the City of Sparks independent audit for the fiscal year of they just ended 23 days ago, will reflect at least some recovery of diminished protection currently afforded existing Sparks residents. Until those essential services are restored to a per capita par with those on 2007 strengths, I firmly believe the City of Sparks, even considering yet more multiple residential dwellings, zoning, and/or construction, is very much multiplying our problems without dealing with our essential needs. I therefore, for the above reasons, respectfully encourage each of you to vote no on both proposals, 2742 and 2743. Thank you.
Thank you, Okay, the city clerk has a bunch of more cards that she's gonna go through. The indication we saw in these cards were, people were for or against the project and didn't want to speak. When she calls your name, if you would like to, she's gonna call your name and say whether you're for or against it. And if you would like to still speak, you will be more than happy to accommodate you at the podium for 3 minutes. Go ahead, Teresa.
Okay, first I'll apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names. I'll do my best. All the cards I have are in opposition, so I will just read the names, and if you,
That'll be easy.
if you choose to speak when I say it, just get our attention as I go through
And
them.
remember, if you want to speak, you can go over anything you want to go over, hold it to a minimum if you're doing the same thing as everybody else has done, so just keep that in mind. Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Teresa.
Diane Grassini, Mike Morgan, Jack Clare, Madison Lisi, Amy Lisi, Hildy Hardman, Cindy Falconer and Christopher Block, Joseph Hartman, Mr. and Mrs. John Atchison, Jim Lindy, Carl and Lehed Wilt, Kathleen Wagner, Jadon Eldridge, Michael Velarde, Joan Polish, Louis Polish, Rachel Hambleton, Jolie Fleck, Linda Stainer, Terry Olson Morgan, Timothy Fitzpatrick, Pamela and Mark Waterman, Sandy Prideham, Kathy, Alan Munson, Mary Shingray LeMay, Nancy Shringley, Eva Homan, Helene Munson, Jane Forrest, Karen Hoyt, David Shahiro, Jacqueline Miller, Charles Hurt, Dorothy Hurt, Deanna Ronan, Wanda Harris, Bruce Jacobson, Dixie Lee Butler, Timothy Fitzpatrick, Kirk Woodliff, Debbie Reed, Jenny Goodrich, J.C. Brooks, Angelina Goodrich, Katie Hill, Brent Hill, Amy Hill, Arlene Christie, Joseph Hill, Bruce Foster, Sherry Fisher, Lon Hill, Danielle Mesty.
Very good. So,
Oh, we've got one in the back.
got no other speakers? Somebody want to speak? Come on down. Do you have a card, or we already called your name? Bring your card with you and just say your name for the record, please.
Sure. Thank you. Hello, my name's Christina Gonzalez, and I've lived for the past 12 years in the Miramonte division. And one thing that I wanted to address, this is my first meeting, but I did not hear in any of the studies the impact it will have on our schools. The schools would be elementary, Bud Beasley, Mendive Middle School, and Reed High School. I work at Reed High School myself, and as you know, I had a son, a kid that went through the system, and we are tapped out. We don't have the resources to keep accepting more and more children into our schools and be able to provide a quality education with, the lack of resources, that are available. The other thing is, as far as traffic goes, since I drive that route every single day, there has been times in winter conditions, it's taken me a half an hour to go 2.5 miles to work. There's been times where the traffic has been backed up all the way to Goodwin from Vista. There's been many times where school buses have been late because of traffic conditions. And that's not even with weather conditions. Many times just for traffic in general, we'll hear on the announcement, such and such bus is late for not being able to get to school on time. So the traffic is a huge concern at the roundabout. I personally have been almost hit several times with people just flying through. That the yield thing doesn't seem to work well as it is. So those are some of my concerns that I have with this project. So I would be in opposition to this. Thank you.
Thank you. It was hard to tell that. I was wavering back and forth until you said that, but not. Okay, you know, it's been a very good process so far. I think everyone's they've spoke their mind. Nobody was derogatory towards anybody else. Thank you very much for doing that. So this is your last chance if you want to speak.
Can I say one more thing?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. You've had your chance. We're going to have another open on the next agenda item. So if you want to speak still at that one, you will be able to, but we're just about done with this one unless you fill out a card or if you want to speak on this one or wait till the next one. It's up to you. But if you've already spoken on this one, please wait till the next one. It'd be happy. So, anyone else?
I did fill out the card, but I didn't want to stop you while you were going through.
Okay, just give us your name for the record. That's fine.
My name is Angelina Goodrich, and my husband and I live right next to Bud Beasley School. And all the traffic reports and studies have indicated, according to what's presented over here, that everything is fine and dandy. I live there, and I can tell you, at the moment, what we're experiencing. Can't leave our house in the morning when school starts. Can't leave our house when school is out. You have to wait for people to come. All the streets get clogged up. And if you go to the extent of adding 75 more families in the area, and each household has 2 or 3 children, or even 1 child, that's just going to add more to the traffic situation over there. And also, there was some discussion about the price of houses, that it was going to go for $350,000. And so therefore, it'll attract maybe, desirable people. That's great. However, the economy today, there's no guarantee that this is what it's going to be like when all those buildings are built. What's going to stop the developer from flipping those houses at whatever he or she can get if the economy flops? And you have somebody coming in, buying all those and putting them out as rental units. Is there anything to stop that from happening? And you're just adding more people. Not only does it add traffic, it also adds pedestrians. There's more pedestrians to navigate as people are driving. So, you know how I feel. Thank you.
Anyone else before I close it on 11:06?
I would just like to make one comment.
You have to come down. Did you fill out a card?
Yes, I did.
Okay, come on down. I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you for
Go through, you have 3 minutes.
It's only gonna take 2 seconds.
Just give me
My name is Louis Palouche. I live just across the street from where they're building the supposedly apartments, townhomes. Has anybody taken in consideration the handbook was written in '88. Here it is 30 years later. Regardless of all that, at the bottom of the hill, they're putting in another apartment complex, Pinecrest. And that it hasn't even broken ground yet. The contractors' office is there, but they haven't broken ground. That's even gonna add to more congestion. We'd just like you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Anyone else? Come on down, sir. Have you filled out a card? Yes. Okay. Come on down and give us your name for the record.
First of all, thank you for having this hearing and hearing our concerns. I am opposed to this.
Give us your name for the record.
I'm sorry, Alan, this is my, Alan Munson, and I'm a new resident here, live up on Diorite Court. And I just have a question, because I agree with most of the concerns, and I haven't lived through it, but I can understand, and I see every day the traffic problems and the danger to, just in that particular area. But I was concerned with the way the studies were done. At one point, I heard 39 trips or something like that, when you got 70, proposed homes, 74. I would think you probably would get 74 at least. And probably if you have two people in a household, you're going to have more. And it's a real dangerous area right now. So you're really adding, more traffic. And I would hope that you would, because I think that study was done by the developer, and I think that it should be done by a little bit more objective person.
Well, it wasn't done by the developer, it was done by somebody hired by the developer.
Yes, oh, well, that's, okay, that's still, but I think you get my point.
I get it.
And so that's all. It's just a question, and living here, it's an absolutely beautiful area, and I'd hate to see it destroyed.
Thank you, Mr.
Please
Lester.
consider it, you guys and women. Thank you.
And I'm not disparaging Mr. Chilton's honesty in his traffic study. I'm sure he did it
But
correctly.
think about it, 39, you got 74.
The traffic expert, I'm not, sir, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
I understand.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on 11-6, bring it back to council for action or questions of staff or the developer or applicant. Questions, Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, could I get Angela to come up?
You certainly can.
I got a few questions for you. First and foremost, is there gonna be blasting?
So at a zone change level, we have not done the final geotech report. I will say that this is the vistas, and before any of these houses were here, it was a mountain. So this is no different than everything around it. Correct. The way that blasting works, if blasting is required, and we'll know that as part of the final geotech report, when we get to the tentative map stage, we'll have that information. There's a mitigation plan that has to be submitted to the city. And as part of that, the city staff reviews that. There's certain times of the day, there's noticing that goes out to the neighbors, and there's a liability attached to it that the contractor is responsible for.
So the answer is you don't know at this time.
Correct.
Can I suggest that you talk to Story County, because they've built most of Story County without any blasting whatsoever, if that's what has to happen. What are peak hours?
Peak hours for
Traffic.
I can let Lauren answer that, but generally it's the 7 to 9 and the, I believe, 4 to 6 timeframe.
That's correct. Those things are tricky.
Green is on.
Green is good. There you go.
Lauren Chilson, Traffic Works. Yes, peak hours are typically 7 to 9 a.m. That would include the school, the morning school period, and then PM is typically really about 5 to 6. It's usually the hour when everyone comes home from work.
So we were saying 39 in the morning, 39 at night?
It's actually 39 in the evening, and it'll be a little bit less in the morning typically, but it's right in those range, both hours.
And I noticed on your design too, you have a hammerhead put in there on the west side of the development in that cul-de-sac.
Yeah, if we can get the PowerPoint back up, we can show you an image.
Yeah,
Correct.
I don't think we can have a hammerhead.
You're
We just had to change developments in other areas to accommodate a 49-foot fire truck turning radius. So
You're talking about
I'm assuming that will get changed.
this piece right
before
here.
it's final mapped.
Yeah, we did sit down with the fire department specifically on that issue, and they were okay with that hammerhead design. So that hammerhead in particular, they were
I
okay
have
with.
concerns that we require a certain cul-de-sac for some people and not for other people. That if we're gonna have a standard, it needs to be across the board. So we'll address that with the fire department. Where's the second fire exit?
On the area right here, this is an existing access. There's a bunch of utility vaults in here now, and so that access will be for fire only. It will be gated, so it's not going to be for in and out for the folks living in the development. It's just for fire access.
Right, so it'll be gated with the breakable lock thing of the G. Okay,
Correct.
perfect. All right, that's all I got for you. Thank you. I just want to address a couple of things. In the budget, and thank you, sir, for going through our budget. Ron and I have lived this, and Mayor Martini have lived this. We had a little thing called a recession that just devastated the city. We just this year got back to the same dollar amount that we were in 2007. That's how badly it's affected us. We laid off almost 40% of our staff during this time. We still have inflation going up, so we've actually lost buying power. We've lost people. Yeah, do we need more cops? Absolutely, but I don't know where we're gonna get them from, because the way the formula works is we have to average back 10 years. So we had a 0.02% increase in property taxes for the city of Sparks 2 years ago. That doesn't even keep up with inflation. So one of the things that does help the city of Sparks is new development. And the reason why is because all of you that have lived in your houses for more than 15 years have depreciated the value of your house by 75%. So that means you're paying 75% less taxes on your house than you were when you moved into it, minus the increases. So if you'll let me finish.
Quiet, please.
If you'll let me finish, minus the increases you've had in the tax rate of the maximum of 3%. So yes, you've depreciated your house. There's been a net basically to the city. We abate somewhere over $5 million a year in lost property taxes, meaning that's money we do not receive to help run the city. So it's something that you need to consider when you're looking at all this. This is a bigger picture type of a deal. I have great empathy for you folks. I'm getting a school put into Ward 2 that it will most likely result in the fact that we're going to lose Wild Creek Golf Course. I don't want to see Wild Creek Golf Course, and there's not a family or homes around that whole area that want to see Wild Creek Golf Course go away. But the city of Sparks has no choice in this matter, and we're getting this thing basically put down our throats because it's legal. It's done what they've done the due diligence, we're in the process of due diligence, and it's something that we don't have a say-so in. I'm not happy about that. I got outvoted 8-1 at the RSCVA board to transfer the land to Washoe County into the school district. So it's not an easy decision. I want you guys to be sympathetic from this side of the dais, because we have to deal with the money part of it all the time. And we try to do the best job that we can do, but you only have so much money. You can only spend it in so many places. And absolutely, do I agree we need more police? By far. We need more firemen? Absolutely. But we're not going to stick our head in the sand and grow out of this, because we can't grow out of it. We can only go backwards if we don't continue to build smart projects. And the thing for me that makes this a little easier to stomach is that these homes are going to be 350 to 400,000, which is in keeping with the area. So I'm okay with that. So I'm sorry if I've made some of you mad, but understand I get the empathy part of it, but you don't understand that I see the financial part of it also. Thank you.
Donald Abbott?
Yeah, this is gonna be for staff, city staff.
Go ahead.
Our sewer.
Who you want to, who you want to ask?
Armando,
Okay.
I hope, maybe.
He'll sort it out from there, don't worry.
Yeah, we'll go from there. On our sewer,
Delegated.
on our sewer model that we ran, what zoning did we take this into account for at the time?
Well, I'm actually going to ask Mr. Erickson to address that question. But I think that the modeling is based on the comprehensive land use plan. And so it has a multifamily designation on it that allows 10 to 14 units an acre. So I think all of our sewer modeling would have been done on that basis, but I will ask Mr. Erickson to address that question.
Councilman Abbott, John Erickson, city engineer for the record. Yeah, we looked at the sewer modeling at 108 units.
Okay.
Yeah.
For MF2. And then before, what was it, or it's originally set at like S2, right? The zoning isn't, or R2, does that sound?
It was originally had a designation on it that required 15,000 square foot lots, which was what was the blanket zoning, if you will, or the blanket designation across the vistas. And then as development projects came forward, they were rezoned based on the master plan. And in this instance, this piece of property is in an area that was designated for multifamily purposes. And the designation in that master plan, in the plan development handbook, if you will, was for approximately 12 units per acre.
And one more question. The development agreement, is that normal with a rezoning, or is that unique for this project?
Well, it's not unique to this project. It's a tool that we have started to employ, and we've done it a couple, 3 times. You're going to see a couple more in the months that come. If you recall, the 67-acre annexation and rezoning that the city did at Highland Ranch Park on the south side there, that was an instance where the city was asked to annex a piece of property and rezone it, and not really have any ability to condition what went on that site or to mitigate some of the impacts. In that case, they were more pronounced because it was outside of the city, because it was an annexation. There were significant infrastructure issues that needed to be addressed. So we have started employing the development agreement in those instances where we feel there's a need to try to condition the project. So going back to last year, when the applicant first applied for rezoning, it came forward without a development agreement. The zoning would have allowed up to 108 units. The Planning Commission heard that case. They denied the request, or they made a recommendation of denial to the City Council. Before it got to City Council, there were discussions that occurred between the applicant and city staff, and we suggested that perhaps the development agreement was a way to condition this project, and by combining the rezoning request and a proposed development agreement, you could impose some of those conditions, including the limit on the number of units. So it's not unique. It's relatively new, and you will see other instances of it in the coming months.
Thank you.
Mr. Dare.
Yeah, so I had a question for traffic. Let's come back there. So, none of this is personal to you, but I have some of the same questions when it comes to some of these studies that seem to happen a long time ago. So are you taking studies from the past and just reinterpreting them, or did you actually go out and study traffic today?
What we do is we update. So recall again, this project did not actually formally require a traffic study at half the count that would normally trigger a traffic study. However, we want to be proactive. Back in August of 2017, we conducted a number of counts throughout that region for the Miramonte Phase 5 project you may know as Miramonte Andelin. That was a very comprehensive study, and the one where we went through and identified every unbuilt lot in the entire community, added them together, and created a comprehensive traffic study. This study, being very small, added these units on top of that, which was effectively a master study for the community.
So just for the record, then the study you're talking about is really probably a year old.
That's correct. The reason we would not recount right now is school's not in session. We wanted to have counts that were in session. So yes, it is. Those counts are 1 year old, but they are including school hours. And to recount right now, we would get lower volumes, and we don't want to do that. So we use the best information we had.
And another question when it comes to the school. So you mentioned 4 to 9. School gets out 3 o'clock.
Right.
And I've been over there, and it kind of goes crazy during that time. So do you have, especially with pedestrians and walking, I mean, all things that I know you know because you've been over there, but you mentioned 4 to 9 and in the morning. Do you have is this equated in there? Is this part of, I don't know, school pedestrian safety time that we can call it something new and fresh, but make sure that it's covered? Because obviously we have some really great people here who I really, and I have to say, only because I want to defend our new mayor. I know for a fact he respects you guys greatly and doesn't think that you guys are anti-growth. I don't believe he thinks that, but because I know that he definitely has a lot of respect for you, as I do. They just really care about their community, and we want to stand with them and care about their community. And so we get it. I believe you. At the same time, you guys know we have a job to do when it comes to the law and different things as well. It gets very difficult and where we have to sit. But these answers have to be in place for us to be able to move forward. So when it comes to that safety factor, can you speak to that for a minute? Or maybe that's something we need to really think about coming back and visiting.
Sure, happy to. So the school period is always a challenge. It's a burst of activity that happens for 15, 20 minutes on the front end of school and the back end, and when everybody picks up, we all know that. We see that at every school, and that's not to be That's not to be cavalier of it. I have the same appreciation for safety as the people in this room. I have kids too. But, you know, that's a 15-minute period of time. I would suggest that if that's a significant concern, yeah, let's come back and look at it. We have already offered that if you would like to see some supplemental traffic analysis at the tentative map stage, we're willing to do that. We're not trying to pull the cloak here or anything else. It's, so if that's something that you would find helpful at the tentative map process, great, let's do that.
So that would be my suggestion I want to put out there, that if this thing does go through, that we are very much come back and we look at safety and we look at traffic in a new light, not from 30 years ago, not even from a year ago, but something that is palatable and something we can look at. And my last question, if Armando, if you don't mind answering. So can you just make it very clear? I think you said it, but I think it's important that everybody hears it. And I'm saying this probably more for our people in the audience. Can you explain, so if somebody wants to make a change in 5 years on this development agreement, and it's not written in there, we're allowed to enforce the development agreement as a condition to, they can't just change it arbitrarily. I just want to hear it clear.
Councilman Dare, Armando Ornelas, Assistant Community Services Director. That is correct.
Thank you.
The development agreement runs with the property. It would be recorded against title to the property, and so it's enforceable by the city against whoever the owner is.
Thank you.
Can I just have a comment? You know, Mr. Chilton, I want to say one thing to you. I feel sorry for you being a traffic engineer and doing studies, because I don't care. I've been doing this for 19 years. I've been doing this thing up here, and the worst people that get beat up more than anybody is the traffic engineer, and I can't figure it out. I feel sorry for you, really. I love your haircut, though. So that's good. So, you know, gosh, I just can't figure out why nobody believes the traffic engineers. I just can't figure it out. But, and having said that, I know you're an honest man, and I know you do what's right, and you do an honest thing, and you do what the law says as far as, I don't mean the law, I mean, you follow all the rules of traffic engineering and all that stuff. I'm not an expert, you are. I believe what you say because you have a reputation in this community to do the right thing. And if you don't, all you have to do is mess up one deal for a developer or whatever, and somebody catches you at it, and you're all through in this town, because this town is very close-knit, and we know who the good guys are and the bad guys. So you are a good guy, obviously, because you do your homework and you do the right studies. But nobody has ever been questioned more than the traffic engineer. In 19 years I've been doing this, and I can tell you, nobody ever does it more than the traffic engineers get it. So I just want to say I respect you for what you do.
Thank you, sir.
And the other thing I want to say about safety and traffic and speeding, you know, if you look next to you, that's the person that's speeding. It's your neighbor. You know, we talk about, oh, we got speeders here, we got speeders there. It's your neighbors that are speeding. Talk to your neighbor, tell them to quit speeding. They're the ones that are speeding in your neighborhood. Who else would it be? There's not that many people going in your neighborhood that speed. It's your neighbors that are speeding. So talk to them. Now I got some other comments, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I had the opportunity to drop off my grandkids at different schools, and every one of them the same. I was lucky to get out of there alive because they're crazy and they don't care. It's about them getting in and getting out, and they don't care where you're at, if you're walking or if you're driving. It is absolutely nuts. That's why the school police have picked up their patrols during drop off at school or pick up at school. It's absolutely nuts. The mayor kind of stole my thunder. People in the Vistas asked me to put speed bumps up all the time. The fire department hates them. And it's you guys in that neighborhood. I live in a closed neighborhood. They're the ones that's speeding. The biggest complaint we get in the city this day is speeding. And I'll give you a little story. On Vista Boulevard, they did a little sting out by the Catholic Church. They gave out 26 citations. The slowest one was 73 miles an hour, 45-mile-an-hour zone. So honestly, look around, and if you have a complaint about speeding, go to the speed limit and watch everybody get mad at you. You know, I'm a firm believer that that if a developer comes in, does everything that's required, and has a good project, he should be allowed to build that. He or she should be allowed to build that project. And concerning your comments to me, you should probably look at that interview again, because what I said was when people move into an area, all of a sudden they don't want anybody else moving in. Never mentioned growth. So You know, I lived up there. I lived up right off of Goodwin, at the end of Goodwin. I lived up there for many years. So I know what it's like up there. And matter of fact, if you look at the top of Los Altos, there's a walkway there. It wasn't there before. I had a guy walking his dog across the street, and a truck took out the dog. Missed him, luckily. So we put in the flashing lights and everything else. So we know what's going on out there. And you know, the city has not recovered. Councilman Lawson talked about a $5 million abatement. That's the last 2 years in a row. We don't get that money. And that money would buy a lot of police and firefighters. So when you see that in the legislature this year, think about what's going on. It has nothing to do with trying to take money from everybody. And in fact, if it passes in the legislature to eliminate the cap, your property taxes will not go up unless you sell your house and buy a new one. So you're safe. It won't go up a penny. So just a little soapbox item. So that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the developer for coming back with the townhouse project, with this development agreement, to listen in the beginning that the apartments, 108 apartments on that property, was not something that the neighborhood wanted. And so I appreciate the product you have brought back as townhouses for sale, which, yes, could be rented, but then my home could be rented also, and we can't control that. But I do appreciate that. I want to thank the residents and people who are here today for being calm, for being respectful, for really being part of this really important process that, like the mayor said, this is really public engagement and a council that tries to respond to our constituents and to our residents and try every day to do the best we can for you, but also you telling us what your input is. And I've talked to a lot of you, and I have answered emails, and I have knocked on doors because I live in the Vistas. I moved into the Vistas in 1990. So I've been there before. I'm at the bottom in the very first De Loretto development, De Loretto and Barker, down at the bottom of Los Altos. So everything that built up the hill and kept building up over the top, I've seen. My kids opened Bud Beasley. So I know the neighborhood. I know, you know, what a great place the Vistas are to live in. A couple of things that I have a problem with the fact that that original handbook, which was the oldest planned development in the city of Sparks, we're kind of learning how to do this. Things we do today are very different. Planned development handbooks in Wingfield, in other places since I've been elected 4 years ago, are tough to change for good reason, because when people buy, they expect a certain thing to happen in a neighborhood, and you can see that in the handbook. I have a real issue with the fact that there were multiple things in this handbook, and we don't know why and how they were changed. There was a fire station supposed to be at the top of the hill. There was a community center that never got built. There were three total AC apartment condominium complexes designated. So it's on the map as the original plan for the Vistas development. Market-driven, I'm guessing. Process was different back then. We can't pinpoint where and how those changes happen, but the changes have already taken place. For me, we haven't stuck to that original handbook, and that's a problem for me on how this project, 30 years later, with everything that's been built and what the market has driven, I really feel that single family is what I can support because it fits into what the neighborhood is today, and it's such a long time frame with and the fact that we haven't stuck to the handbook now, that that doing it now doesn't make sense, more because of how the neighborhood has developed. So the multifamily for me, even though the townhouse, I love the project, the multifamily for this reason, because there's been exceptions to that handbook, and because the single family product, actually this zoning request does allow for single family. And a condition, if we put a condition on for single family, I know that if it's a whole different project that does come back as single family, is a whole, it's a comprehensive plan, it's a lot of changes that would have to happen to request that as a condition. So I hesitate to ask for a condition because that's a big leap to ask for it to be single family solely, because the whole project would look very different. Some of the conditions I do think are very important that we put on it is the 2-car garage is a must. I think parking self-contained is a must. And bottom line for me is the fact that we haven't stuck with the handbook in the past. And I think for me, and bottom line for me is I was elected to represent my constituents, and my constituents overwhelmingly in Ward 4, not just Ward 4. I mean, I've got all of Ward 4, but I am in the Vistas and have lived there 28 years. So my constituents are who elected me to represent them. So I can't support either of the proposals coming before us.
Okay. Quiet, please. Say again? Okay, so, okay. I have another one here for Andy Wagner, who is against the project. So put there in the file. Okay, it's time now for us to make a decision here. And again, thank you for your courtesy in the public comment. We appreciate it. Again, I know it's a passionate, emotional issue, but we have to deal with business as business. So having said that, it's time for us to ask for a motion. Anyone want to make a motion? Anyone want to make a motion? It's your ward.
But I don't support it, so I'm not making the motion. I guess I can make the motion.
You can make a motion to deny it.
Die for a lack of second.
Huh?
Or you could die for a lack of second, or it could pass.
So I can make a motion to deny?
Sure. I think you should.
Okay, since this is my word, I will make a motion to deny the request for the development agreement.
Do you have a second? Okay, now seeing no second for that motion, it dies, and we'll ask for another motion, please. Mr. Lawson.
I move to adopt bill number 2742, ordinance for approval of development agreement by and between the City of Sparks and Landstar Companies LLC concerning the development of a parcel of 7.72 acres in size located at 2255 Los Altos Parkway in Sparks, Nevada.
Mr. Smith.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Lawson, seconded by Mr. Smith to approve 11.6 as outlined by staff. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes 4-1. Ms. Bybee is a no. Okay, let's move on to 11.7, which you've already made a presentation, right, Armando? So I will, Madam Attorney. I was gonna open up public hearing again, sir. See, Diana? Bye, please. Just exit peacefully. See you, dear. Okay, we've already had the presentation on 11.7, but I will open up the public hearing again. If somebody in the audience would like to speak to 11.7, you're welcome to now. Okay, seeing no one wanting to speak, I'll close the public hearing, bring it out to council for action. Questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, seeing none, I'm looking for a motion.
I have questions.
Go ahead, go ahead.
The question I have has to do with some of the questions we asked already. So how do we make sure that we can get some of these things placed on as conditions? Is this now time to do that? Some of the conversation to have, because I am very concerned about everything I just spoke about and would like to know how do we make, I mean, from traffic study to safety, those things, I understand the situation when it comes to what this is zoned for. I understand all those things. However, I think that there are some questions that need to be answered, and I would like to see them in there.
Well, one comment, please, if I might, Armando. And I appreciate what you're saying, but we have several more bites at this thing, do we not? We're getting a little too far in the weeds before we even know what's gonna happen for sure. Is that not correct, or am I imagining this?
Mayor Martini, Armando Ornelas, Community Services Director. The next step for a townhouse project would in fact be the tentative map process, and so.
Is that a better time to ask for conditions than now, or when's the best time to ask for conditions, I guess is that.
Well, those conditions would be considered as part of the tentative map process. The applicant is on the record regarding the additional conditions that they are, that they have offered up. Not only did they, address them verbally, but they provided us a PowerPoint that is now part of the record. So I would say to you that the appropriate time to evaluate the project in all its particulars, because it may evolve somewhat between now and when they actually submit, as they move from concept to, to an actual schematic design and do the engineering for the project. So those conditions will be, there will certainly be conditions, a whole host of conditions that would be part of any tentative map. And we have these comments from the applicant, and so we will add those to that process.
So, Mr. Darren, I'm sorry, all due respect, I'm not trying to shut you down.
Oh, no, I don't feel that, thank you.
But I think there's a better time to do that, and you'll still have a bigger bite at that. Plus, it's getting late, and I'm eating too much candy, so it's time for me to go home, yeah?
I appreciate that, and I agree with him, so thank you. I
Okay,
appreciate
good.
it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disparage you or
No,
anything.
no, no, I don't.
Go ahead, Ms. Bybee.
I would just like to echo also my support for those conditions that the developer has presented tonight. That I would support that when the time comes, I would like to see all of the conditions that were laid out tonight, and we could have more possibly later, but those were the presented tonight. I do support those conditions.
Okay, looking for a motion then. I think we're Mr. Smith.
I move based on findings Z1 through Z23 as set forth in the staff report to adopt Bill 2743 to rezone real property approximately 7.72 acres in size located at 2255 Los Altos Parkway, Sparks, Nevada, from PD, Planned Development, the Vistas, to MF2 PUD, multifamily residential, 10 to 14 units per acre, planned unit development.
Mr. Abbott. We have a motion for Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Abbott, to approve 11.7 as outlined by staff. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Passes 4-1. Ms. Bybee's a no. Okay, number 12, comments from the public. I have two cards. Andy Wagner, do you wish to speak? No? She left. Kathy Lind, I have here. 12-1, public speak? No? All right, let's move on to 12.2, comments from the mayor, city council, and city manager. Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have an announcement. Due to a resignation, the city of Sparks is looking for someone to serve the remainder of a term of the Sparks Planning Commission. The term runs through December 31st of 2020, and this appointment will be eligible for reappointment for another term. Persons interested in serving on this committee should complete a community service application available from the city clerk's office. You may also apply online at the city's website, www.cityofsparks.us. Click on Government on the webpage, then click Volunteering for a Sparks Board or Commission and complete a volunteer application. Applications will be accepted until the close of business on August 27th of 2018. That's all, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Abbott, that's what you were talking about, those things. We're gonna move that. We'll make arrangements to move that particular item that Mr. Driscoll is doing now. We'll do that, move it up the agenda, so there's people in the audience to hear that we have openings.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you asking for that. Okay, next is Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like the city just to reconsider the starting hours for construction, case-by-case basis, to 6 o'clock in the morning from around July 1st to middle of September. I know that the city is doing it weekly right now. I think you can probably go at least 2 weeks on the special use permits. And then if somebody violates those work hours, that the job be stopped, and we figure out what we're gonna do with it. Also, God, I forgot the last part of it.
Oh, my God.
I know, must be late. So if you just look into that and see what we can do. I know they're getting special permits for, or it's not special permits, what's temporary. And it's, they use it for their pours, which can start at 5 o'clock in the morning. And like I say, case by case, because if they're in a residential, it's a lot different than they're building a school out in the middle of nowhere. So just look at it if you would.
Don't do it without permission, you're gonna get the smackdown too, okay?
That's right.
Just saying, you construction guys, you need, Mr. Dare.
I'd like to ask officially City Manager Driscoll to look into our arts and culture advisory committee. Our ultimate goal would like to see that become the city of Sparks that is really speaking into that. It's not a regional board. We really want it to be a Sparks heart in what we do, but I do understand it might take a few steps to get there, so just a plan that you think would be appropriate, maybe brought back to us. Thank you.
Is that it?
Mr. Dare, you had something that you needed to put in under comments
From the earlier meeting.
I just did.
earlier in the meeting?
That's what I
You
just
did it?
Oh,
That was it.
we were too busy trying to figure.
We were trying to figure out what it
We were
was.
listening.
We didn't want you to miss your opportunity.
Thank you, I should appreciate it.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.